I'm Skip Mussett, and I'm one of the trainers here in the Austin Experience Center. And today's deep dive is around CSS. What it is designed around building or understanding the tool that is a template. Um, why a template? We'll get into that. What this isn't is kind of a beginner CSS, right? We have plenty of content online that can help you, as well as in the help file that can help you get started in CSS. I started down this journey almost 2 years ago now, which is crazy to think about. Um, Actually, with the idea of putting an icon at the top of a button and text at the bottom, right? And 12,000 lines and a completely unmanageable CSS style sheet. I accomplished what I set out to do, and it was completely unusable. So I went through other versions of this, and so what the idea behind this tool, and that's the idea of today, is to kind of show you the tool, kind of show you how and what makes it a template, and why things are the way that they are, understanding so that you can modify them for each one of your systems that you build. But is the first part, and I'm going to start with this designer file that you're looking at, and it is in. Dan said it. He sent you the assets. This has two different. They're actually pretty close to almost exactly the same. One is actually programmed in block controller, and one is programmed in text controller. And so, just as a different way to look at things, because there's things that are in there that manage some styles and icons and things like that. But we wanted to show you that you can program them in any direction that you wanted to. And we will go over the style sheet, but I wanted to kind of back up and talk about a UCI. And this is not to influence you about how to build your UCIs, or which I have plenty of opinions on that part. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. Today is the reason I want to talk about this layout is I call it regionalization, right? So I set up regions on a UCI. And what I mean by that is for the most part, I put navigation buttons at the bottom, right? So down here is my navigation buttons, right? So the main navigation as a user starts to use the UCI itself. Now, corresponding that is there's a header, right, that goes along with that, right? And so that my colors track together. Inside here is source, right, where you would select a source, and that's just what I'm calling it, right? So I wanted you to understand, so as we start to go through the style sheet, it makes sense as far as the naming. So yes, you have to dive into my crazy brain for just a minute, and I apologize for that, and we'll keep moving forward as fast as possible so nobody drops off and gets lost. Um, Again, as you get started into CSS, I do recommend the going through the help file and pulling out controls and watching and seeing what happens in a style sheet. And there's plenty of content, again, that's available online that can get you from quote ground zero up to speed in a CSS standpoint. Even using this tool to better understand it. Um, how you can take, for those that don't know, you can pull out of the file, you can pull the style sheet. So if you go to, let me do that again, tools, show design resources, you get this, and you go to what's installed. This is the file that I'll be dealing with. And if you click on it and then click the download, it will download it into your folder, and then you can open it up. This is just a preview of it. You can't edit this, but you can download it. And if you want to follow along, then that would be great. I am going to look at this file. So this is the template. It is, I don't know, somewhere around 1,000 lines. Um, this is built around Q-SYS, our Q-SYS branding guidelines, just so that you understand where the colors come from and why certain things are the way they are. And that starts with the
Hey, real
importing.
quick, Skip.
Yeah,
Sorry. Well, I think I saw somebody raise their hand. If you have a question, just write your question into the Q&A section, and then we'll address them as we go along there. So, if or maybe somebody accidentally raised their hand, whatever. But just wanted to clarify that.
no problem. So it's the style sheet starts with, and I try to do things. Well, now that I have a template, I actually do it the same way pretty much every time. But I start with any importing, right? So I'm importing Q-SYS as custom fonts, right? So I import the custom fonts.
Skip,
Yep.
can you hold up 1 second here? I've got Jerry says I don't see that file in that location. And could you potentially go back to your QSys designer file real quick? He may be looking at. He may not have hit the tab between
If you go to
available and installed. So there
right.
you go, Jerry.
So show design resources gets you here, and it typically will come up here and say what's available. What's available is what is actually on your computer, the computer that you're looking at this file on. That's what it's looking at the folder, right? This folder, how QSYS, right? Because if you open up the folder, all the file names are style.css. How designer knows the difference between different style sheets is actually the folder name. So these are representative of the folder names, and I have a few folder names on this computer. What is installed, meaning what is a part of the designer file, is under installed. And this
I'm
is,
gonna I'm gonna double check the file that I sent out to make sure that it is there. But
I'm pretty
so
sure because that's the file I'm looking at right now. I opened it up and right
oh,
before I
you opened it up from there.
sent
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Yep, it should be there. Cool. All right. All right.
So then you can download it. Um, and I'm just going to go through, this is just a general tour of what it is, right? And we'll talk about things in detail. Um, so to go back to, I started out with um, that put an icon at the top and the font or the text at the bottom, which again, I achieved. And if you wanted to do it, I can send you the code and you can be completely frustrated with how unmanageable it actually is. So again, this template was about speed, right? There's um, some things that I do that and the way that I layer things, right? But first I start with just to kind of, this is just a general tour. I import things like I import my font. This is a custom icon font that you get as a part of this. Um, and yes, it is named Oscar. Um, the first version of this file of the font used to be Oscar Made Me Do It was the first name of the file for the font. But these are specific icons. So when you look at the icons that are in this file, that's where they came from. And that is a whole different adventure that we can go down at a separate point. And maybe that's one of those third things, Dan, or something. Um, the next, the keys to a template is this root directory, right? I'm going to call it a directory, right? Denoted by the colon root, your squiggly bracket, and then there's another squiggly bracket all the way at the end of this. Because the idea behind that is that changing your root folder is all you need to do. And you really don't touch the body of your CSS because the body of your CSS is just calling on the variables that you do up here. That way you don't have to do it in 72 places in the style sheet when you change something. You can change it in one place and have it affect the style sheet. So I, to create a variable, it's dash dash. And then whatever the name is, you can't start, you can't start any class or any variable with a number. You can include a number, obviously, as you see here, it just can't start, right? I refer to pixel sizes right here. Pixel sizes, that's all it is doing. Now I could use these for border width, radius, right? All kinds of things. This is just a list of a few variables that I have that I use for different reasons, and I'll show you. All right, I have colors, right? And yes, Q-SYS has 25 colors. So I have all the different colors, and all I did was take the hex values for all the colors, and I've just created variables. Um, I'm very enamored with semi-opaque versions, so that's the same colors up here, just a semi-opaque version, and all you do is just put your transparency rate here. Um, the next down is any images that I want to call, i.e. logos or backgrounds or things like that, right? I am also very enamored with gradients, particularly linear gradients, because that is something you can't do in properties. So I'm very into those things. I utilize them. Um, and so that's just generic way to call them, right? These names can be whatever it is that you want to call them, right? I start with so that they group together, right? I start with right? These are all the gradients. I want them to group together. These are all the images. I want them to group together. These are all the colors. Remember that theme, right, as you move forward. Now, if you look here, these are variables calling a variable. One note to self. Dan, never forget this. If
Yes.
you call on a variable that has not been created, meaning if you call this variable calls on a variable right here, and that variable has not been created, it breaks the entire style sheet. But this is where VS Code, so I'm writing this in VS Code, comes in really handy. Okay, meaning that if I click on, I will only get a list of variables that have already been created, right? My choices. So it's a kind of a good self check there, um, just as a note to self. But make sure that have created a variable before you call it. But again, this is still a variable, but it's calling on a variable, right? Now, there's some globals. Now, remember when we started talking about the regionalization? I talked about navigation, right? So anything navigation related, right? The things that I'd want to do to a navigation button, right? Dan, why do I have a navigation, a source, and a transport?
Well,
For
there may be different attributes you want to change
exactly. I want the
depending on the
ability,
button style or
correct. I want
depending
the
on what it's
ability.
being used for. There you go.
Mhm. Exactly. Sometimes, all right, I want to have my navigation buttons look like one thing. I want to provide something else for a source button that does something a little bit different to provide emphasis. Same thing for transport. But in a nutshell, it's just three different ways that I could style a control, right? And that's all I'm doing. And so in those buttons, for the most part, I deal with colors and radiuses. I don't deal with font size in this. I add those later, right? That's a layered thing. It's same thing with an icon, but right, these are my color, my background, my borders, my border radius, width, all these things for each one of these. This was something new that I had to add in because we just came up with a flex box. So I created two different variable lists for a flex box, right? There's rows or columns, there's things that you can do, and with the choices that you can do for all of these. Um, what do I want to do with my meters? What do I want to do with my faders? By the way, the fader is a very interesting piece because it has 6 parts to it. That was an adventure of itself. And then here is where I can call those images, right? My logos. Q-SYS is very specific in that I had to come up with a logo background, right? A logo background because Q-SYS in their branding guidelines says it can their logo, our logo can only be on black or white. It cannot be on anything else for a particular size around the logo itself. So you can write all those in. Now, what are these? Let's talk about what has a dot and what doesn't have a dot, right? These first lists are um, global attributes or global properties, right? This came as about actually it was from a class that um, they're like, why when you drag a control out onto a UCI is it's like a micro font and it's always dark and you can't read it, right? Well, there's no way to change that default size because of the way that the software works. Um, so I created a global properties that calls our font and makes every control automatically put at least a 24 pixel font. So automatically, when you drag it over from a control or do whatever, create a control, it's automatically going to have at least a 24 font. Now, globals are also the least priority. Okay. Everybody understands the C. The C is cascading, right? Cascading style sheets, right? Last one wins. These have the lowest priority. A style sheet is nothing more than a giant argument table, right? Who wins, right? When you're talking about who wins, the global properties are the lowest priority, right? They will happen immediately, right? As soon as you start it, but they can be overridden by anything, right? When you put a dot, that is a class, right? And it has definite priority. It actually has the highest priority unless there is something below it on the list, right? So let's talk about that for just a second. And I'm going to show you an example here in a moment. But, right, some of the reason that I named things is so that they group together, right? Anything with a button that has to do with a button. I start with BTN for button, and they all group together. Part of that is I use BTN so that they sort in order on the list. So let me show you in the file real quick. So we'll pick a control, right? And when I look at this list right here, and I wish I could zoom in a little bit more. Maybe not. Anyway, this list sorts. So no matter how you wrote your style sheet, this list sorts alphanumerically, right? So, i.e., all of my buttons are first. Anything I have to do with colors comes second, faders, right? You can see the orders, anything fonts. Part of the reason that I wrote a lot of these things is so that they sort together and so that they cascade from an argument standpoint in the right order, right? I want my
Okay.
colors. Go ahead.
I've got a couple of questions when you
Hit
finish
me.
that.
By all
First one
means.
is, are you able to do, there is one from Nicholas Smith. Nicholas has a question that says, and I don't know that we'll answer it here. We may follow something back with him. When will Q-SYS Designer software support more modern color spaces like HSL or OKLCH? When will QDS support the flex property more accurately? When can we actually control the sizing of elements blocks on the UCI sizing using CSS synthesis actually controls all styling in true font and architecture? Nicholas, I think I'll take this one. You know, the CSS, we don't truly pull in and integrate CSS. We read it and we do what it's asking. So it's different. So there's some attributes that we just don't have, but I will try to follow up and get back more answers about if we see the CSS maturing further down the road. So I'll get back with you on that one. So
One, I just wanted to
feel
click
free
through.
to reach out. If you got my email with the thing, just post that question back to me via email, those questions, and I'll get them we'll get some research on that and let you know where we're maturing that to. The next one is Brandon Cruz says, are you able to do animations with, for example, gradients on buttons or faders? So the question there is, can you do animations for like gradients on buttons or faders?
Well, I'm going to separate those two. I can do
Okay.
a gradient, but I cannot do an animation.
Okay.
Right? Not through a straight CSS. You can do it. Um, I think it's possible from a Lua programming standpoint to create the illusion of an animation. We do not support that, and I will tell you that we will get to more modern ways that we're going to allow, i.e., HTML5 and other things that'll be from an external standpoint that will start to get incorporated. I don't know what the time frame is on those. Um, I would not tell you it's right around the corner,
Yeah.
right? Which is
It is.
why
It's a roadmap item.
it is a roadmap item. So stay tuned. Um, it would be something that I would tell you to go on to communities
Yes.
100% and ask for it. We do a lot of, for lack of a better way to put it, crowdsourcing as far as what we do with our platform. All right, when it toys. Did he go base 64? You
Yeah, he
can.
did. He said if you use Base 64, you can do some animation. So
Yes. Um,
and then
I
go
so
ahead.
stay tuned. Anyway, just I wanted just to tell you that stay tuned that it will start externally and then we will connect dots and then it will slowly integrate. But it's
Perfect.
we're a minute from that.
Yeah. The last question is if I script color to a button in my file, does that override my CSS class or a global property?
Yes, 100%.
Okay,
So
cool.
it is internal properties first, CSS second, Lua is third and final. So
Wow.
if you like all the different parts in a property, right, that are based in, hold on, right, all the properties of a button, right, all these properties that you have. If you don't write something in CSS that overwrites these, you can still change things here. But as soon as you write something in a CSS file that's applied, these no longer work.
Yeah.
The same thing if you wrote a Lua that would overwrite your CSS, you would no longer respond to CSS because you've overwritten it. That is the
So
higher.
if you define the corner radius in the CSS, you can't, yeah, the CSS will override the graphic properties here. But if you define corner radius in the Lua in the UCI script, then that will override the CSS. So I
Yes,
get
it
it.
is the be all and end all is Lua.
Exactly. It's kind of like all Transams are Firebirds, but not all Firebirds are Transams, or it's nothing like that. But anyways, go ahead, Skip.
Um, so again, this list is sorted alphanumerically, right? As you can see, this is just one of my buttons down here. I've got a navigation property, right? I have it's aligned left, right? I have a font size. And then to understand that if I choose any of these, all of these fonts have the same priority, right? That last one wins, right? Meaning if I check something down here, it will change. But if I check something above it, it won't, right? So understanding that is key, right? And I want to show you an example of I have this navigation button icon font only, right? And I'm going to apply it. So I basically just overwrote because of the cascade order, the navigation button, right? I'm going to emulate here real quick. Whoops, wrong drop down. Come on, baby. Dang.
Okay, I was over here asking a question, but I think it's going to get answered here unless you're having some file issues. Andrew says, how quickly do these changes populate visually? Applying the class name locks in coded properties, and the
It's
changes
already
made to those
made.
properties
The
directly won't even be visible in the layout tab. So,
oh, as far as the properties,
yeah,
applying a CSS, it basically doesn't change anything in the properties as far as what you're going to visually see. I don't know exactly what just happened to my file, but it 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 ignores it. For lack of a better way to put it, if you've applied a CSS and there's a style sheet applied to a file and you apply it, it affects a property like corner radius, like we were talking about. Dude, I
it'll
don't know.
affect that immediately as soon as you check the box. But
Correct.
is but um,
Give me a
but
second.
you don't see you won't ever see the properties change over in the properties tab. So
It will not.
dang Windows. How's that? I like that. I will say that.
Try that again.
But do we see those styles in the layout tab in design mode, or does it need to be emulated to take effect? Oh, I see. I see. I believe you have to be emulated, correct?
To see what? The changes?
To see the changes. Or no, that I don't think you have to, do you?
No, no, you can see the changes,
Yeah.
although, give me a second. I apologize. My file just died. Where was that? That was. Did you send me the file, Dan?
No, I didn't send you the file.
Let's try that again. Come on, baby. All right.
Yeah, that's so. Yes, the answer is when you're
You'll
actually
see the
changing the
changes
properties,
visually.
you should see it right then, Andrew. So
Now, again,
without emulating.
I'm going to go back to the fact of depending on where you made the change
Yes, that's true.
and how you made the change. And that's the whole point to what we're talking about is the cascading part of it. Again, this is a giant argument table, right?
Yep.
I'm going to try it again. All right, that if I go here and I check this nav font only, which basically tells in the off state, this is the off state, this is the on state. It basically tells the off state to go transparent because I use it for like text, right? I don't want any background. I just want my text colors to be the same up here as they are right here. Now I'm going to try to emulate this again. We're going to find out if this works or this is going to blow up. All right. Now you can see that this is transparent. It doesn't look like the rest of them. But why is this color? Why is that different? All right, that didn't change. All right, so let's go look at what that means. All right, so in my buttons, I have a background, right? My background off, my background on in all my states, both my off, my pressed, and my value one, which is my on, right? In my icon font only, I do tell the off state to go transparent, but I do not tell the pressed or the value one or the on state to do anything. This is key so that you understand that if I don't recall it or if I don't change it, it's going to use what it already had, right? In my pressed and my on state, it is going to use, which is what you're seeing, it is going to use the values that were already set up here for my pressed and on. Now, you can use that to your advantage, right? From here and understanding those things. But I wanted you to understand that it is a giant argument table. And if you haven't redefined it, it's going, and you define it once and you don't redefine it, it's going to carry down what you had before, right? Which is what this is saying. Hello. Man, my computer is kicking butt today. Is this where I can ask my boss for a new computer?
We have video proof. Yeah, exactly. Go watch Skip's webinar.
Yeah, I have video proof.
The CSS won't update when live or emulating, just like you can't update properties natively. That's going back to that last one. Yeah,
Can't
I
make
slid off.
changes.
Yeah,
You can't make
you can't
changes
change
to
a
them.
corner radius on an active file, right? So the only time you'll see it is if you do that. So just to kind of reiterate that one. Jake Perry says, can you clarify the difference between pressed and value one? Also, will pressed work on trigger buttons?
It does, actually, to the disdain of a few people internally that just couldn't get their brains wrapped around it a few weeks ago. That there is, as I wait for my designer file to catch up. I don't know what's going on, Dan, because it is not liking it. Um, yes. So there are three states. There are technically are more than three states. Um, there can be even more than that, but there are technically a pressed and a pressed on, right? So your value 0 is your off or your off state, right? Your value 1 is your on. So what happens when it's Boolean on? I'm dealing with these are all toggle buttons down here, right? That so that's your 0 and 1, right? You're on and you're off. Um, Pressed is a value. There technically is a pressed and a pressed value 1. So I can do two different things there. I deal mostly with just pressed as opposed to press valued 1. I don't find too many times where I really need to deal with that. But that is technically how I give feedback that a trigger button is being pressed. So I get at least some visual feedback for at least that instance of, yes, user, that you have pressed the button. And so as long as somebody's holding it, almost like a momentary, although programmatically it doesn't do anything, right? As soon as you pressed it, whatever was going to happen on your trigger is doing its thing, right? Unlike a momentary, it's not working like that. But visually, I can make it look like a momentary so that I can give the user feedback with that pressed value. And
Hey, one thing I noticed there, Skip, is you're signed in to Reflect. I don't know if that's, doing extra things to your
I don't know, but it's
to your
stuck in.
yeah, Q-SYS designer there. So shoot, what a bummer.
All right, let's go back and we'll talk more about the style sheet then, because that's working.
Yep.
Um, while I let my designer figure out what it's going to do. Again, naming was huge for me. And I will say it this way. It was a huge adventure. Why did I end up with names? Right. Again, this is the order that you're seeing in the drop-down list in Designer is with everything with a dot in front of it, right? That's what you can apply to a particular control, right? Um, I personally start with what these buttons, these first ones, and one of the reasons why they're named with a B for button, as opposed to C for control or whatever it is that I wanted to call them. I tried to think of something higher in the alphanumeric order, was because I wanted to do it first, right? That I might want to apply something later that would override it. And if my designer file comes back, I'll actually show you that here in a second. But um, so it's B buttons, right? Then I go through everything with a button. These are things that track with my button. right? Colors. I want things with just like what it says, icon font only, right? When I want a title or a header, that just changes the text color or the icon color to match with my navigation or to match with my source or to match with my transport, right? Here is where I have a mute button. I want to change the background color for my mute buttons. I want to change my background color. It doesn't do anything else to the button other than change the background color, right? Everything that was applied previously, corner radiuses, all those other things, all still apply. I'm just changing the background color. These, I'm changing the icon color. These, I'm changing the color of a font, right? In general, you're like, you already had pixel sizes up there. This is specifically, and this is a personal pet peeve. And yes, I'm going to pass it on. Personal pet peeve that I have never, in every single software that I have ever used, I have never chosen extra large, large, medium, schmedium, small. I have chosen a color. I mean, a size, a pixel size, right? It's a 12, it's an 18, right? That's just me. And that's all I'm doing here is I'm applying a text size. Now, I have been using this one, vmin, a lot more. Um, and I'll show you examples if I can get my designer file to work here
I
in a
can
second.
also Skip. I can walk through my file if you need to. If you want to tell me what you want me to click on, I can do that as well. There was one follow-up question from Jake's question. He said, "So stateful buttons, toggle momentary, and state trigger have a value and a pressed question mark, and trigger only has pressed." I think is what he's looking
They
for.
all have pressed. They
They
all
all
have,
have pressed, but
they all
the
have
but
pressed.
the stateful buttons would have a value.
Correct. A state trigger is a little bit different animal in the sense that it does have a pressed, but it's also applied that you also can set values
It's
based
true,
on other things.
right? And would
So
the momentary fall under having both of those as well? The toggle obviously has a state and a pressed, but what about the momentary?
all
Momentary seems like it would only be
all
pressed.
all controls have a pressed
Okay,
value.
but since the momentary never latches at a value, it would
Again,
be a
this is not about program. This is has nothing to do with the programming side of this,
right. Gotcha.
right? This is in the sense that we're talking about, and that's what I wanted you to talk about. That your momentaries and your every button controls are going to work the way that they always work, programmatically. Visually, visually, they have when I'm interacting with this in an HTML standpoint or the website of things. This actually is closer, our press state is closer to a hover. When you hover over a button on a web page, that's closer to our pressed state. As far as the way that it works, at least from mine, when I deal with my little HTML5 knowledge at this point. But
Perfect.
uh,
Okay, cool.
um, and you can start to see that I'm just calling in all of these, I'm calling variables, right? These are those variables so that all I'm doing is changing that root directory. This is the part that makes it a template, right? I add and change my colors. I change all the things up in my root directory and I don't change. As a matter of fact, if I could tell you anything, is to not touch anything below your root directory, right? That doesn't mean you might want to add things down here because you've come up with something that you like the way that it looks, right? But that gets added and you're being protective. The next part of this series is where I break this file in half. That my template is there's a template base, which is everything below. And then I have my actual CSS that I change is only the root directory, right?
Nice.
So I separate those files so that I don't mess with everything below,
Right.
right? That's the idea is that I don't want to have to keep because the other side of that is that if you do that, every time you open up these files, okay, I think I've got it back now. Every time you open up these files and you've tweaked something, it's going to say, hey, you've made a change. Do you want to update it? Right. So every file that you opened up it will keep updating. Whereas if you locate all of your base, that doesn't change. Or the reason it's going to change is because you're truly going to add something to it, right? I have a particular type of control, like for me, it was the flex box. We never had a flex box, right? We had a flex box. I had to add that to the template side of things. I had to add that in because we didn't have those controls and I didn't have any of that information. Oh, I wanted to show you the vmin. It's something that's visual, right? And if you look at all of these, I'm going to actually uncheck that one. Right? If you look at all these controls, they're aligned left. I have a 36 font. And I'm going to uncheck that. I'll check that. I'm going to uncheck it. Right? And if I change them to vmin, which basically says it sizes your font size to whatever is the minimum size of your control, meaning you only want to do this when you have a true rectangle. Anything that gets close to square, don't use vmin. All right, because it will just blow up and it won't work right. All right, so anything that's truly a rectangle. But now once I use vmin, what also is cool that I do really like is that when you do this padding up here, right, does everybody understand the difference between padding and margin? So margin, right, there's a container that contains your control, right? The margin is the gap around, right? All right, I've made the whole container smaller with that margin. My padding is what happens inside the control, right? But when I use vmin, what I have found and what I do like is that it keeps the icons and the text together when it sizes them, as opposed to when I just use the 36, that my font changes and my icons are based on this, but my fonts aren't necessarily based on that. So this glues them all together so that they go up and down and size together, which I have found very useful. Um, it took me a while to start to use that, but rectangles only. What was the other thing that I wanted to say? Order naming, why we talked about C. Any other questions, Dan, while I figure out where I'm at because of all the um,
No, let's see. Could you show an example of how a flex box is used in CSS? Currently, I have an issue where the XY coordinates for all flex boxes default to 0, 0 on actual Q-SYS hardware if I'm using multiple layers with flex boxes. Whoa, that's a lot, but
so in these are the two flex box. So I have two different ones. I have a flex box column and I have a flex box row. Now for me, I've defined them right out of the gate with they're transparent, there's no border, no background. I make them invisible. Technically, I use them as group boxes now more than anything. We're still having some issues, at least in my experience right now, with flex boxes doing odd things to controls, not all the time, meaning they can hold on to properties, as in it looks like something is pressed when it's not, but it's not a full pressed. It's kind of an odd deal. Everything still works accurately, but I set these right here, right out of the gate in my flex box, right? I set my radius border width, and then this is my gap, right? Where I set my gap. Um, Now, I don't know that I completely understood the question per se from a layer standpoint, but this is all the properties that are inside a Flexbox. Um, And each one of these, depending on how you justify things, right? There's justify and how you align, and those are all different. And they do different things to the controls themselves in reference to gaps. So it's something that this is what Dan, that if somebody wants to send me something and we can kind of ping around, sometimes it's me not looking at it,
Sure.
not being able to see it. Um, that I'm
Yeah,
trying.
Brandon, if you got my email, just email back to me, or I'll actually drop Skip's email in the answer here, and you can follow up and try to. I think you're even available today if you needed to, right, for a few minutes.
I am available.
Yeah, you guys can get together. So I'll send you Skip's email there. So
Yeah. So if I took and added a flex box, right, my flex box is going to actually make it go away. Flex box rows, right? Because that's what I've told it. I've told it to be invisible. And then if I start to drag controls in here, it'll do that. But um, it's something that I would just play around with as far as from a CSS standpoint. I have found that's the cleanest way for me to manage from a gap standpoint. Um, Again, I haven't spent a lot of time with a Flexbox yet because of the quirky properties that we've got going on right now. Oh, here was the other thing that I wanted to show you. We had talked about changing the background. So this is my mute button, right? I've applied my source button, which gives it my line around. I've got my icon right in there. Somewhere there's an icon. Oh yeah, it's volume. Now, if I check something up here, it doesn't change if I check something below it, right? Because all of my icons are the same priority. Um, Now I have this, which basically says I haven't affected the border, right? My border width, my radius, I haven't affected anything else. I've just told it to change colors of the background, right? So there's very cool ways that you can layer things, right? And that all has to do with the naming and the naming order of things, right? That understanding how these are going to sort, how you name them, and then again, how to affect them, right? If I'm changing, right, I can change my global. As a matter of fact, they're all red right now. Dan, let's change them all to blue,
whoa, that's crazy.
right? Blue. I think it's e-blue, right? And then I hit save. Now I've reopened this file again. Oh, cool. Nope, I didn't get my e-blue right. All right, so let's do that. Nope, it's B blue.
There you go.
Blue. All right, so there's the blue version.
Nice. Trey Schaefer has a question. What is a flex box? I'm really new to this. That's all right, Trey. You don't ask. If you don't ask, you won't know. So
There you go. It is it's something in CSS. Oh, and yeah, it's something in CSS that we've just added to ours, right? The translation of a Flexbox, but it is a container that allows you to put controls inside it, right? That allows you to manage. We're going to call it an organization container, and what's really cool about it is that let's say you have 5 controls in this container, and you want to make something available or not available based on a cable being plugged in, right? I can make those controls invisible or not not visible, right? So just like down at the bottom, right? If I hit them, well, if I had all these in a flex box, it would rearrange them and keep the same gap that I've told it to, right? If I told it to align in the center, it would keep all of them aligned in the center based on however many are visible or not visible, right? So it's a container, it's an organization container for controls. And when we finally work the last tweak out of it, like I said, they all function when they're in there and they work really great. And I love them from an alignment because I'm extremely OCD about alignment and it does all of that for you. Um, and it works really great. Um, but yeah, that's what it's doing. It is, well, I'll just blow up this file. Dan, we're just going to blow up this file.
Let's blow it up.
Blow it up, right? If I bring this flex box in, right? And I tell it to go flex row, right? And we're going to make it, right? And then I take all of these and I drag, oops, I need to, so hold on.
We're running about T-5 minutes to the end, so blow it up and we'll figure out what we need to do to wrap her up too. So
All right, so I just took all of those and dropped it in here. Right? So now they're all aligned. I've told them a gap of 5, whatever. But now inside this flex box, if remember I just made one of those invisible earlier, right? Now it will organize and rearrange. I've told everything in this particular one it justifies to the left or whatever, right? I could justify it in my style sheet to centered or whatever it is that I'd want to do with it. But you get it. It's an organization tool. And that is my 2 minutes before we have to go.
all right, cool. Let's see. In a flexbox, controls be grouped and the group visibility be changed for those controls.
Not that I'm aware of. From a grouping standpoint inside those, and you cannot flex inside of flex. Already tried that one.
Okay. I tried to pay my Visa with my
I know how to
master.
group them.
Yeah. Let's see. Jerry says, if you're familiar with VT Pro E, is it comparable to dynamic icon or button list widget? Hope that helps.
Are you asking me or telling him?
Well, that's what he says. Jerry says, if you're familiar with VT Pro, is it comparable to dynamic icon or button list widget? I believe that's the.
Yes, somewhat. Yeah, I
Oh
don't.
yeah, Skip is a VT Pro guy. Skip used to rep that product.
Yes, I used to work there. Um, it is similar to from an overall feel. I don't remember the specifics necessarily to do from a direct standpoint.
Brandon chimed in and said, sort of, you just can't scroll through those buttons.
Correct. It again, I would look at it as a way to align and organize and a way to manage a group of controls, particularly if you wanted to have controls go away or be visible or not visible. In that situation, again, this gives you that way that I can choose any one of those and it will keep things in the same order that they are. It will just show and hide the ones, and that will keep the same gap, the same alignment that I've told it.
Nice.
Uh, yeah, no, it's
So
huge.
I got a statement here from Brandon. It says, my question regards a bug that I assume I've found, and I'm emailing. He's going to go ahead and email you, but I think kind of just wants to get it out there. I would advise not to use flex boxes on multiple layers at a time. When emulating, it looks fine, but on our hardware, flex boxes don't always line up where they show in emulation. So could be something we'll get to the bottom of. Thanks for reaching out to Skip, and he'll either get you we'll work with you. And if we need to get it into support or if we need to get a ticket put or a bug kind of documentation, we'll certainly get that done as well too. I've got one here from Drew Romanowski. I've got some neighbors that are Romanowskis up in northern Wisconsin. So I don't know if Drew's from that area, but no big deal. There's probably Romanowskis coast to coast. How does the button CSS class name know how to call the different states? Button navigation, button pressed, value one, if I'm only assigning the button navigation class.
Okay. In there, button navigation,
Oh, there you go.
navigation pressed, button navigation value 1. So I wrote 3 classes that look like the same thing. They only show that they don't show this part, the value. They just show button nav. Now, technically, and I don't want to go into it this class, there's ways that I could shorten this up because I could put commas, and if these two are the same, I don't need, it's like there's
But
ways that
for
you can shorten
easier
this up.
human readability.
Correct. This is longhand on purpose for this particular deep dive.
Yeah.
I'll start to show you some of the shortcuts and other things, but this is it. I'm calling button nav, but I'm telling it button nav, and then there's the pressed value. Again, there's also a pressed value 1, and then there's a pressed value, meaning if I'm off, if whatever the control is off and I press the value, I can have it change colors. If the button is on and I press it to turn it off, I can have it change to a completely different color on the way off, as opposed to a completely different color on the way on. Does that, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Well, cool. I know this feels like if you've got some CSS experience, hopefully you got some tips and tricks on
Getting some good
button
questions.
class. I love one of the things for sure I like in there is if you know something's going to override something else, then you have to alphabetically name it so that it won't get overridden. I think that's a good takeaway. There's a lot of good takeaways in this. Everyone will get a recording of this. Um, and we appreciate the investment. I've got one more here. Jacob says, if you wanted to update the CSS file and use other photos, how easily is that? Well, we could probably take that. So, do you want to touch on that just real briefly?
All right. So in this file, here's my folder.
Yep.
Right. Everything is named CSS.style. Here's my image folder. Drop the images in here. Now this is my own structure. Drop the images in here and then call them in your style sheet,
Yep.
right? Where I have a logo, right? I'm calling a logo. It's just a file reference. Here's my background. Here's a file reference. That's it.
Yeah. You can kind of follow it and see that it's in the file, the folder. It's called images under, and then there's the whole thing. So if you kind of go back to,
It'll give you this.
yep. So that's how you do it. Cool.
I yeah, please reach out. Um again, I will be available for a while today, so I look forward to anybody reaching out. But
Yeah. And
hopefully,
yeah, we appreciate the investment of time and thank you everybody for sticking around and a lot to digest here. The second one, oh, I just closed my
in March,
schedule.
like
We're going to be
mid-March.
running in March, the second section of this where it's a little less about how to structure the style sheet and leans a little bit more into how would you describe the second piece of this one, Skip?
Oh, it basically we're going to look at really leveraging an import
Okay.
and to break apart the file to again protect the template side of this, the
Right.
things that you don't want to touch, because I did it to protect myself from myself.
Right. So essentially, you're going to define what all of those classes are and all of those global, but then
But that's
skip
it. That's
breaking it
all I do.
apart, and then you only will adjust variables like, hey, I'm always going to use this icon, this button style, this button shape, but I just want to change the color or the text size or the variables that we've defined at the top.
Yeah,
So
we're gonna
that
do that.
makes it very, because that way you do it for ABC company, use the same template, change the colors, and use it
Yeah,
for
well,
XYZ company. So
exactly. We're
beautiful.
going to talk about branding and how to use the branding guidelines.
Perfect. Yeah. And you'd be surprised. Sometimes just ask a company like, "Hey, can you reach out to your marketing team and get their brand?" Now they're not going to probably have a CSS style sheet. They might. If you got a web team, they may have, things like that. But if you can just get branding guidelines, sometimes I go to people's website and you can go in and click, open
Branding.
up, yeah, and just go in and like figure out what their colors are, right, based on that. So, anyways, a lot of great tips. We look forward to seeing everybody back in March if they decide to come back. We appreciate that, and everyone have a great day. Thanks much.
See ya.
All right, bye.